Hi guys. Tonight we sail into the cold, salt-bitten world of medieval pirates. The sea is black as ink, the air sharp enough to slice through wool, and the waves beat against the hull like fists demanding tribute. You can almost smell the tar, the fish oil, the sweat of men who haven't felt a warm hearth in months. Out here, food is not a luxury. It's a daily prayer whispered to an indifferent sea. And you, standing on this frost-rimmed deck, might be surprised how quickly the stomach forgets the taste of comfort. You probably wouldn't survive this. Most of us wouldn't. But the pirates who did those strange, cunning, half-starved wolves of the sea learned a kind of patience that feels alien now. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights and listen to the ship groan around you. The North Sea in winter is a grey, endless thing. The horizon vanishes into mist, and the cold seeps into your bones until you stop noticing it. The deck planks creak beneath your boots, stiff with frost. You move slower now. Everyone does. The men around you, Gaelic, Breton, Moorish or English, share one look, eyes dulled by hunger. Supplies are low, the barrels half empty, and the salted pork has begun to smell like death itself. The wind cuts across your face as you haul a line, wondering what's left to eat. The ship's master, a wiry man with a beard frozen into points, mutters something about conserving rations. The word ration has a bitter taste. You've been counting crumbs, scraping barrels, and trading insults that sound too tired to sting. A fact historians often point out is that pirates were not the wild, careless eaters of legend. They planned, calculated, and hoarded food with military precision. Every biscuit, every salted fish, was tallied and stored. But the ocean had its own plans. Leaks ruined flour, salt turned to damp stone, and meat, no matter how well packed, eventually rotted. One night, when the moon glows through ragged clouds, you find yourself sitting beside the galley hatch, listening to the cook curse under his breath. The pot boils weakly. The smell rising from it is uncertain. A stew, maybe, or a punishment. He lifts the lid, pokes the contents, and mutters, "Still better than snow." You think of home bread fresh from the oven, a mug of ale that doesn't taste of iron, but home feels like a story someone told you once and forgot to finish. The only warmth here is in the memory. By dawn, frost has painted every rope white. The sea is calm now, unnervingly so, like it's waiting. You climb to the forecastle, looking over the stillness. Hunger does strange things to men. You've seen a deckhand lick ice from the mast to soothe his throat. You've seen another chew on a strip of old leather, pretending it's dried beef. The ocean whispers under the hull, a cold lullaby. The historian in your head, if you can still think like that, reminds you that food was not just sustenance for pirates, it was power. Captains who fed their crew well earned loyalty. Those who failed risked mutiny. The sea didn't forgive weakness, and neither did men. Some scholars still debate how organized these floating communities really were. Were they anarchic mobs of thieves, or disciplined navies bound by necessity? The truth probably floats somewhere in between. You look at the faces around you, sunken eyes, cracked lips, hands trembling from cold, and realize that survival has its own kind of order. You scrape your bowl clean, though there's hardly a spoonful left. The cook ladles something that might once have been peas, now grey-green mush. He sighs. "We'll be at it till we're bones." You nod, too tired to answer. The taste is bland, but at least it's warm. The captain paces the deck, boots thudding softly. His breath fogs the air. He's thinking, always thinking how to stretch what's left, how to hunt, how to steal. You can almost hear the plans grinding in his head. Somewhere beyond the ice, there are merchant ships loaded with grain and salt beef. Somewhere, warmth still exists. You remember stories of warmer days, of rum and roasted fish on sunlit decks. Now, the sky is the color of old iron, and every exhale feels like surrender. You pull your cloak tighter, trying not to think of the gnawing in your stomach. The sea stretches endless and uncaring before you. A crewman nearby hums softly, a tune so old it might predate the language you speak. It's a lullaby from his homeland, something about hearth fires and bread. You close your eyes, just for a moment, and almost taste it, the sweetness of barley, the comfort of full bellies. Then a wave slaps against the hull, and reality pulls you back. Your fingers are numb, your lips crack when you smile, though you're not sure why you're smiling. Perhaps because in some strange way this misery feels shared. You are part of something, a frozen brotherhood of need, and in that, there's a strange peace. The day drags on. The sun never really rises, only glows weakly behind cloud and mist. You catch a glimpse of gulls circling far off, too distant to mean land. Someone mutters that gulls always find the dying ships first. Someone else laughs, though it's not funny. When night falls again, the cook calls for dinner, though no one bothers to move quickly. The smell is the same: boiled salt pork and hardtack softened in water. It's barely food, but you eat it carefully, reverently, as though this tasteless stew holds a promise. The historian's voice in your mind whispers that, for many of these men, food was the only connection to sanity. Meals, no matter how grim anchored the day, gave rhythm to survival. Even now, centuries later, archaeologists find fragments of pottery, fish bones, grains of barley in shipwrecks, tiny ghosts of meals that once kept men alive. And as you lie back on the deck, wrapped in a damp blanket that smells of smoke and brine, you think of all those forgotten meals. You wonder how many times this same sky has watched the same hunger. Somewhere in the dark, the captain murmurs a prayer not to God, but to the sea. You listen, half asleep, the cold numbing everything but the slow beat of your heart. You drift between dreams of firelight and the sound of distant waves. The ship creaks, the wind hums, and hunger curls beside you like a quiet companion. The frost thickens overnight, turning the deck into a sheet of glass. You wake with salt stiff in your hair and the smell of smoke lingering in the air. Somewhere below, the cook is already at work, coaxing life from the last of the fuel. You follow the thin trail of warmth down the ladder, boots slipping on icy steps, and feel the ship sway under your weight like a living thing trying to shake off its dreams. Salt, smoke, and desperation are your morning companions. Every scent in the galley tells a story of preservation, of humans' wrestling time. You can almost see it in the barrels lined against the wall, packed with salted fish, slabs of beef, and pale cakes of lard. Each one a small victory against decay, but none of them immune. The air itself is damp, and salt that was meant to preserve slowly draws in moisture, turning slick, then useless. You sit on an upturned crate as the cook stirs something that might once have been meat. He glances over and grins, the kind of grin that hides defeat. "If it don't kill us," he says, "it'll keep us chewing." You laugh softly, though your stomach knots at the smell. Preserving food at sea was an art form. The pirates borrowed tricks from merchants and navies alike. Meat was packed in brine so strong it could burn your tongue, and fish smoked until it turned black. The result was food that could survive months in the hold, if not taste good while doing it. You take a bite of the hard, salty strip he offers, and it feels like chewing wood soaked in seawater. Still, you swallow. Historians often note that salt was the most valuable commodity aboard these ships, more prized than gold in winter. Without it, survival was a race against rot. Some captains paid handsomely for the purest salt from Iberian mines, while others scraped together whatever they could find, even from evaporated seawater that left a bitter aftertaste. The sea has its own cruel humour. Sometimes, barrels burst open in storms, flooding the stores and ruining everything. Then came the smoke. Men would build small fires on deck, under iron pans, drying strips of meat and fish, until the air filled with a haze that clung to every breath. The smoke seeped into clothes, hair, even dreams. You watch the cook rub his eyes with the back of his hand, leaving streaks of soot. "Better smoked than spoiled," he mutters, tossing a handful of coarse salt into the pot. The sound is sharp, like hail hitting tin. The smell is worse, but at least it is warm. One curious fact from surviving ship logs: some pirates seasoned their rations with gunpowder when spices ran out. It sounds absurd, but traces of potassium nitrate in gunpowder gave a faint tang, a little spark of flavor in a meal that otherwise tasted like damp rope. You imagine the taste and almost laugh, thinking how hunger turns men into strange experimenters. There is still debate among historians whether pirates used saltpeter as a preservative or simply as a dare among the desperate. The records are fragmentary, the stories half-believed. Yet you can picture it, can't you? A group of shivering sailors, daring one another to season their supper with something meant to explode. You chew another mouthful, trying to ignore the sting of salt on your cracked lips. The cook hums softly, a tune from the coasts of Brittany, and for a moment the galley feels less like a coffin and more like a hearth. Smoke curls around you, soft and familiar, as if it's wrapping you in something close to comfort. Above deck, the wind howls through the rigging. You climb up after eating, the grey sky pressing low. The cold feels sharper now that you've warmed slightly. On the main deck, men are hauling barrels, inspecting ropes, pretending not to think of food. The sea has gone a dull green, thick with ice drift. Somewhere out there, a gull cries, and the sound cuts through the silence like a knife. You glance toward the horizon and think about how much the human body can endure. The pirates of the North, the frozen Baltic, the English Channel, they all shared one truth: hunger was the hardest enemy. You can fight storms, outwit navies, even cheat the hangman, but hunger never lets go. It creeps into your bones, wears away at your mind until even the taste of salt becomes a kind of comfort. There is a superstition whispered among the older sailors. They say the sea watches those who waste food, spill a grain of salt, toss a bone overboard without respect, and the ocean remembers. You don't mock that kind of belief out here. You tip your bowl into the sea carefully, whispering something you don't quite believe in, just in case. The smoke still clings to your clothes. Your fingers smell of brine. You rub them together and watch the flakes of salt glint like frost in the grey light. Somewhere below, the cook begins to sing again, a low, rough voice that echoes off the timbers. You close your eyes for a moment, letting it lull you, and realize that salt and smoke are not just the tools of survival, they are the taste of the age itself. The wind shifts. You hear the sails strain, ropes groaning under tension. The ship moves with new purpose, as though the sea has finally remembered your existence. Ahead, the horizon blurs into something darker, maybe a storm, maybe a promise. You take a deep breath, and the air tastes of iron, salt, and distant land. As you stand there, you think of how every bite taken aboard this ship is a kind of rebellion. Every salted scrap, every smoky mouthful, defies the sea's attempt to claim you. And though your belly aches and your fingers tremble, there is pride in that defiance. Night will come soon. The fires will burn again, and the same bitter smell will rise from the galley. But for now, you face the wind and let the salt sting your lips, feeling, for just a moment, alive. The morning comes quiet but cruel. The cold presses into your skin as you wake to the creak of the hull and the low groan of ropes under strain. The sea is still, a vast mirror of grey that reflects nothing back. Hunger gnaws in your belly, and already you dread what will be served. Someone mentions the word hardtack, and the sound alone makes your jaw ache. Hardtack, the infamous ship's biscuit, lies stacked in canvas bags near the galley. They are not really bread anymore, not after months at sea, more like slabs of baked stone, pale and chipped, stamped with holes to keep them from rising. The cook calls them tooth testers. You pick one up, tap it against the table, and it rings like wood. It smells faintly of dust and salt. Records from English and Dutch ships describe these biscuits as lasting years if kept dry. They were cheap, sturdy, and utterly joyless. Made from flour, water, and sometimes a trace of salt, they were baked twice until every drop of moisture was gone. It made them immortal, yes, but also barely edible. You take a bite and feel the edges scrape your gums. To soften it, the cook advises soaking the biscuit in ale or seawater. You choose ale. It turns the bread to mush, though it still tastes faintly of mould. Men used to joke that hardtack was both food and a weapon, depending on how you threw it. You imagine a deck full of hungry sailors tossing biscuits at rats, laughing through cracked lips. Oddly enough, a few ship journals describe how sailors carved names or symbols into their biscuits, turning them into small charms before eating. Perhaps it was a way of claiming ownership in a world where nothing belonged to you, or maybe it helped them forget what they were actually chewing. You take another mouthful and try not to think about the worms. Yes, worms. They come with the flour, or crawl in later when moisture sneaks through the seams. The men call them weevils, though they are really beetle larvae. They wriggle in the dim light when you split open a biscuit, tiny pale bodies twisting before you crush them with your thumb. Some sailors used to joke that they were just extra protein. Others pretended not to see. A curious note found in a Spanish navigator's log tells how some crews tapped the biscuit against the table to shake the insects out before eating. The sound of hundreds of men knocking their food on the wood became part of the rhythm of life at sea, like the hum of wind or the crack of rope. Tap, 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 then silence as each man chewed. Experts remain divided on whether hardtack was truly tolerable for long voyages or merely the lesser of evils. Some maritime historians claim the flour was sometimes mixed with ground peas or beans to improve flavor, while others insist it only hastened spoilage. You picture the argument, one scholar defending pea flour, another shaking his head over moldy crumbs. Either way, the biscuit remained the same cruel staple that defined centuries of sailing life. The cook sits down beside you now, his fingers red from the cold. He grins, showing a gap where a tooth used to be. Lost it to a biscuit, he says, and you cannot tell if he is joking. Maybe both. He dips his own piece into the pot of weak broth and eats without complaint. You do the same, letting the warmth trickle down your throat, dull and tasteless. It is said that even pirates, who lived outside the laws of nations, respected one rule: never waste food. Every crumb was earned. Even if it was crawling, even if it tasted like rope, you ate it, because tomorrow there might be nothing. Later, when the sun struggles to break through the clouds, you join the others on deck. The air bites your face. The ropes are crusted with frost, and gulls follow the ship like pale ghosts. One of the younger sailors jokes about how the gulls probably eat better than you. Nobody laughs this time. You take a moment to look at the horizon. It is not food you crave anymore, but texture, flavor, the feel of something alive. The sea offers nothing but cold air and memory. You wonder how many men before you bit into the same hard biscuit and thought the same thought. This is what survival tastes like. Somewhere deep in the hold, rats scurry. The men pretend not to notice, but they know what will happen soon. When rations run low, the rats become both enemy and meal. The line between disgust and necessity blurs fast at sea. You glance toward the hatch and shiver. A strange entry in a Danish captain's journal describes a winter when the crew mixed powdered biscuit with seawater and whale blubber to make a kind of paste. They called it sailor's pudding. The description alone makes your stomach tighten. But the captain wrote that it kept the men walking. That was enough. You feel the ship roll gently, the icy water lapping against the hull. The sound is steady, like breathing. You chew another bite of biscuit, more out of habit than hunger, and let the rhythm of the sea swallow the noise. For a moment, it almost feels peaceful. The cold wind whistles through the rigging again. You pull your coat tighter, crumbs falling into the folds of wool. The sea stretches endlessly before you, grey and wide, and somewhere beneath that surface lies the promise of warmer days. You glance at the bag of biscuits, still full, and feel a strange gratitude. They are miserable, yes, but they exist. And in a world where the difference between life and death is one meal too few, even misery can be mercy. The sea moans like a living thing tonight. You sit near the galley fire, such as it is, watching thin flames lick the edges of a blackened pot. The air smells faintly of yeast, sweat, and smoke. Around you, men clutch their cups as though warmth itself might slip away if they loosened their grip. The cook hums under his breath, stirring a strange brew that bubbles softly in the half-dark. What he is making isn't ale, not exactly. It is something weaker, rougher, a fermented mixture of water, barley scraps, and whatever sweetness could be scavenged from the stores. Weak beer, they call it. It keeps the thirst down and the sickness away, at least for a while. Chroniclers of the age often mentioned how medieval sailors trusted weak beer more than water, believing it cleaner, safer, almost medicinal. They were not wrong. Fresh water went foul within days, but alcohol, even in tiny amounts, kept it from rotting. You take a sip from your cup and taste the sour tang. It burns just a little on the way down, but in this cold, even bitterness feels like luxury. A few men laugh softly as the warmth reaches them. The youngest sailor wipes his mouth and sighs. If it had more kick, maybe I'd forget how cold I am. The cook answers with a snort. You'd forget how to stand too. Still, the beer is precious. It carries morale more than nutrition, and the men know it. Sometimes, when grain ran short, brews were made from pine needles or dried herbs soaked in hot water. One peculiar record from a Hanseatic merchant ship mentions a sea tea brewed with lemon peel and garlic. The crew swore it kept the chill from reaching their bones. Some researchers question if these strange brews actually prevented illness, or if they simply gave men something to believe in. Faith in the cup, perhaps, more than chemistry. Yet belief alone could sustain you through a night like this. The cook ladles stew into rough bowls, each portion the same murky grey. The smell is thick with salt and boiled fat. You dip your spoon, watching the pale chunks drift through the surface. Maybe fish, maybe pork, maybe both. The line between meat and memory has blurred. You lift it to your lips anyway. It tastes of smoke and sea. According to several old ship diaries, galley stews were never the same twice. They were the sum of what survived. Onions gone soft, dried peas, bits of biscuit crumbled for thickening. In desperate times, even sawdust found its way into the pot. The cook called it sea flour. You swallow carefully, hoping this isn't one of those nights. One strange detail mentioned in a privateer's journal tells of a winter when the men mixed whale oil into their soup for richness. The result was revolting, but filling. He wrote that the smell haunted the crew for months, yet none left a drop uneaten. You imagine the stench, the slick sheen across the surface, the reluctant gratitude that followed. You sip again. The stew warms your stomach, slow and steady, like a small fire spreading through frozen wood. Around you, the voices soften. Someone hums a lullaby in a language you do not recognize. It drifts through the air like smoke. No one speaks of hunger here, not directly. They talk around it instead, with humor or memory. One man recalls a feast from years ago, his mother's bread heavy with butter. Another describes oranges so bright they seem to glow. You listen quietly, letting the pictures replace the taste in your mouth. An old sailor near the door taps his spoon against the bowl and begins to tell a story. He says there was once a captain who brewed beer so strong it could catch fire. He used it to light the ship's lanterns when oil ran out. You laugh, though you suspect it's a myth. Still, in the dim light, every man is smiling at the image of flames born from drink. Academic circles continue to discuss whether pirates carried their own brewing tools or relied entirely on captured supplies. Some evidence suggests small fermentation barrels were kept even on fast-moving vessels. If that is true, it means that brewing, like music or prayer, was part of the rhythm of survival, something steady to count the days by. You stare into your cup. The firelight dances on the surface, golden in the gloom. It reminds you of home, though you cannot remember which home anymore. The cold has taken that too. Outside, the storm begins again. Wind howls across the deck, rattling the shutters. Someone tightens the ropes holding the galley door. The cook just shrugs and mutters, "Let it scream, it can't come in." You smile at that, a faint spark of warmth that has nothing to do with food. The stew pot is empty now. Men scrape their bowls, licking the last traces from the sides. The sound is quiet, respectful. When you've gone this long without plenty, even scraps feel sacred. The cook wipes his hands and sighs. That's it for tonight. He pauses, glancing around the room. Dream of roast chicken if you must. It costs nothing. You stand and stretch, joints stiff from the cold. The weak beer sloshes in your belly, softening the edges of the world. The ship tilts slightly, rocking you toward the stairs. Above, the wind whistles through the rigging again. You climb slowly, cup in hand, careful not to spill what warmth remains. When you reach the deck, the world is pure grey. The sea glows faintly in the moonlight, broken only by thin lines of white foam. You sip the last of the beer and close your eyes. The taste is faint now, almost gone, but it lingers like memory, bitter, smoky, alive. For a moment, the cold recedes. You breathe out, watching your breath drift away like fog, and feel, impossibly, a little less alone. By dawn the storm has passed, leaving the deck slick with ice and silence. The air is so clear it hurts to breathe. You step out, boots crunching over frozen ropes, and smell the faint tang of the sea briny, cold and almost metallic. Somewhere below, the cook is counting what remains. A few sacks of peas, a dwindling barrel of salt pork, and not much else. Hunger waits quietly in the corners, patient and confident. Today the captain sends a small party to shore. The ice is thick enough to carry weight, and somewhere along that white horizon there might be food. You volunteer without thinking, driven by the dull ache in your belly. The landing boat groans as it is lowered, and the men climb in, clutching spears, nets, and crude hooks. The sea slaps gently against the hull, each sound a reminder of distance. The coastline ahead is sharp with rocks and snow. Your breath clouds before you as you drag the boat over shallow ice. Every sound carries: the squeal of oars against frost, the crunch of boots, the whisper of wind across empty land. The world feels hollow here. Contemporary letters from coastal settlements mention seeing such groups in winter, ragged men combing the shores for crabs, kelp, or the remains of wrecks. They were not always identified as pirates, sometimes as lost sailors, sometimes as starving fishermen, but their hunger gave them away. You can imagine how it must have looked. A handful of men, wild-eyed and desperate, picking through tide pools like scavengers. You crouch near the waterline, prying at a rock until it yields a small crab, slow and pale from the cold. You hesitate, then toss it into the basket. The man beside you finds a cluster of mussels, their shells chipped and dull. "Boil them," he says. "Boil everything." Oddly enough, old Norwegian records tell of pirates surviving winters almost entirely on seaweed. They learned to dry it, pound it, and boil it into broth. At first, locals mocked them, then copied them when the snows grew too long. It turns out the sea, stingy as it is, offers just enough to live on if you are humble enough to take what it gives. The ice cracks faintly under your boots. You move carefully, searching between rocks. The tide is low, and the exposed pools shimmer with trapped life-tiny fish, limpets, and snails clinging to stone. You gather what you can, numb fingers fumbling. The smell of salt and decay fills the air, but after weeks of bland stew, even that feels like hope. There is still no clear agreement about how often pirates relied on foraging during winter voyages. Some maritime historians claim these expeditions were rare and risky, while others insist they were essential for survival when trade routes froze. The truth likely shifts with each coastline, each storm, each hungry crew. You find a gull's egg cracked open on the rocks, frozen solid. You slip it into your pouch anyway. Behind you, one of the men shouts. He has spotted something glinting under the ice, a stranded fish, trapped when the tide fell. Together you chip it free, laughing through chattering teeth. It is small and stiff, but still a miracle. By midday, the baskets are half full. The sun hangs low and pale. The group gathers driftwood for a fire, though most of it is soaked. Smoke rises in thin, reluctant trails. Someone jokes that it smells like victory. The cook, who came along despite his age, squats by the flames, boiling seawater with the shells and fish inside. The smell is strong and sharp. One curious note from a monk's diary in Flanders describes meeting shipwrecked sailors who made soup from boiled seaweed and bird bones. He wrote that it tasted of salt and mercy. You taste the same now, holding the rough bowl to your lips as the steam curls into your face. The broth burns your tongue, but you drink greedily, swallowing sea and smoke together. When the pot is empty, everyone sits quietly. No one speaks for a while. The cold feels softer now, the hunger less cruel. You watch the snow drift across the rocks and think how strange it is that survival can taste so raw, so pure. As the boat pushes off again, you glance back at the shore. It looks almost peaceful, like a place untouched by time. But you know better. Every inch of that coastline remembers the desperate hands that scraped at its stones, looking for life. Back on board, the men carry the catch below deck. The cook sorts it, muttering to himself, already planning tomorrow's meal. The captain watches from above, his face unreadable. He knows this small harvest buys only a little time. Still, time is something. The wind rises again, curling through the rigging like a voice. You pull your cloak tight and lean against the rail. The sky is beginning to darken, streaked with violet and silver. Somewhere out there, beyond the ice, spring is waiting. But for now, the sea holds you in its frozen grip, and all you can do is breathe, and wait, and trust that tomorrow will bring something more to eat. You close your eyes and let the rhythm of the waves lull your thoughts. The taste of the sea lingers on your tongue, both bitter and comforting. Hunger is still there, but for tonight, it sleeps. The next morning begins with the hush of snow falling onto canvas sails. The ship rocks lazily in the slow current, half frozen, half free. You stand near the railing, your breath curling into mist. The world feels still, like it's holding its breath. Then, far off, a sharp sound cracks across the air. The lookout points to the horizon. A wreck. You follow the captain's gaze and see it too, the pale ribs of a broken vessel jutting through the ice. Even from here, you can tell it has been there for weeks, maybe longer. The wood is splintered, sails shredded, the figurehead gone, but the promise of food draws every eye on deck. By midday, a small boat is lowered again. The sea sighs beneath it, dark water lapping against the sides. You pull your cloak tighter as the crew rows through floating shards of ice. Each one glitters in the weak sunlight like glass. When you reach the wreck, the smell hits first old wood, brine, and something darker like spoiled grain. You climb aboard carefully, boots slipping on the frozen planks. The wreck groans underfoot. In the hold, barrels are scattered like dice. Some burst open, spilling pale dust across the floor. You kneel and scoop a handful between your fingers. Flour, damp and clumped, but still recognizable. Maritime records from the 14th century describe how scavenging from wrecks was both common and dangerous. To take goods from a stranded ship was to risk the wrath of local lords, yet hunger cared little for laws. Many pirate crews survived entire winters by raiding the remains of merchant vessels that never reached port. You pry open another barrel. The smell makes your stomach twist. Salt fish, gone slick with rot. Flies, even in this cold buzz faintly around the edges. You gag but keep searching. Hunger is patient, but not polite. One sailor nearby calls out. He has found a crate of lemons, dried and shriveled but whole. You laugh, almost disbelieving. The sharp scent cuts through the stench like sunlight. You bite one out of curiosity and flinch at the sourness. yet your body seems to crave it instinctively. Later generations would learn that citrus guarded against scurvy, but here, in this frozen ruin, it is simply a miracle that something fresh still exists. A peculiar entry in an old ship's log mentions a similar, find a cargo of oranges from Spain that washed ashore months after a storm. The sailors who found them wept as they ate, though the fruit was half rotten. You imagine that scene now and understand completely. As you move deeper into the wreck, you find another surprise, a sealed jar of honey, thick and dark but still edible. The cook opens it with reverence, dipping a fingertip to taste. He closes his eyes, silent for a moment. Then he nods. It's good. The men pass it around carefully, each taking the smallest taste. The sweetness feels unreal, too soft, too alive for this place. Experts on maritime life suggest that honey was prized as both food and medicine aboard medieval ships. It preserved indefinitely, provided energy, and disguised the taste of spoiled rations. You can see why. For a few moments, the men seem almost human again, smiling, whispering, remembering sweetness. Then, at the back of the hold, you find a barrel sealed with pitch. The captain helps crack it open. Inside are slabs of cured pork, darkened but still solid. The smell is strong, yet not unbearable. The cook tests a piece, nods slowly. We can make this last. The relief that sweeps through the crew is almost holy. There remains uncertainty among historians about how much of pirate life was scavenged versus stolen outright. Some evidence suggests a complex code among crews. Wrecks found adrift were fair claim, while raiding a survivor's ship was condemned. But at sea, morality bends with the wind. Tonight, no one asks where this food came from. As you row back toward your ship, the light fades. The sky glows faint pink along the horizon, the water turning black beneath it. The wreck grows smaller behind you, a ghost returning to its grave. You cannot help but feel a strange gratitude toward the dead sailors who once owned those supplies. Their misfortune is your breath. Back aboard, the cook begins sorting the finds. The honey goes into a small jar, the pork into the salt barrel. The lemons are hung near the galley fire, drying slowly. You stand nearby, watching him hum softly, a tune that sounds older than any map. That night, the meal feels almost festive. The stew has real flavor again, faint but present. Someone tells a story about another wreck they once found, filled with spices from the east. Pepper, cloves, cinnamon treasures worth more than silver. You imagine the smell, sharp and warm, mingling with the cold sea air. The wind outside howls, but it no longer feels like an enemy. The fire crackles softly. The sweetness of honey still lingers on your tongue. You think about how every bite of food out here is borrowed from someone or something that did not survive. It's a grim truth, yet in its way, it feels sacred. Before you sleep, you glance out at the black horizon. Somewhere beyond it, more wrecks drift, more ghosts waiting in the deep. You whisper a quiet thanks, not sure to whom, and close your eyes. The ship rocks gently, carrying you into dreams that smell faintly of salt and smoke and honey. Morning breaks soft and grey. The frost has thinned, and a faint drizzle falls from the clouds, turning the deck slick and shining. You can smell smoke drifting up from the galley again, but this time it mingles with something unfamiliar, spice, maybe, or hope. The cook is stirring the pot with new care, as if afraid to wake the ghosts of the wrecked ship that gave you this food. The captain leans on the rail, his eyes fixed on the shore in the distance. A village lies beyond those hills, its chimneys faintly smoking in the mist. You know what he is thinking. Food, trade, maybe even warmth. But the villagers will not welcome you with open arms. Pirates and traders share a language only when hunger forces it. The crew gathers, whispering. One man suggests going ashore at night. Another argues for daylight, when the villagers are less likely to panic. The debate swells until the captain lifts his hand. "We'll trade, not raid," he says. If they give, we take with thanks. If not, we go hungry. The silence that follows is heavy, but no one disagrees. Contemporary accounts from coastal communities along the North Sea describe these uneasy exchanges. Fishermen meeting seafarers whose faces they did not recognize, trading flour for rum, bread for salt, or dried fish for nails and cloth. Sometimes it ended with smiles, sometimes with knives. Hunger has its own diplomacy. You row ashore with a few others, the boat cutting through cold water that reflects the grey sky. The village appears slowly, built from stone and driftwood, smoke curling from its roofs. Dogs bark as you approach. A man with a spear steps forward, suspicion carved into his face. The captain raises both hands and speaks gently, his voice calm and low. "We have goods to trade," he says. "Salt, rope, a little cloth." The villagers watch. Then an older woman steps out from behind them, wiping her hands on her apron. She studies your faces, sees the hunger there, and nods once. Inside her cottage, the air is warm and smells of baking bread. You can hardly stand it. The sight of loaves rising by the fire makes your chest tighten. She sets one on the table, then points at the bundle you carry. The captain opens it, revealing a small jar of honey and a strip of cured pork from the wreck. Her eyes widen. Honey is worth gold here. She nods again, slower this time, and gestures to the bread. The exchange is silent but understood. She cuts the loaf, steam curling upward, and divides it into pieces. The crust crackles, the inside soft as clouds. When you take a bite, it feels unreal. The warmth spreads through you, thick and heavy. Old chronicles from northern France mention how some villagers quietly traded with sea raiders in winter, choosing survival over loyalty to any crown. They risked punishment for treason, but hunger silenced politics. Perhaps this woman has made such bargains before. One curious story from a Breton fishing town tells of a pirate who traded his pistol for a sack of turnips and a wool blanket. The villagers later displayed the weapon as proof that mercy was worth more than steel. No one knows what became of the man, but the tale survived centuries as a parable of quiet humanity. You sit in the corner, chewing slowly. The bread sticks to your teeth, and it tastes divine. The cook murmurs something about how he could live forever if he had an oven like this. The woman smiles faintly, maybe amused, maybe sad. She gives each man a small cloth bundle before you leave, salted cod, dried herbs, a few onions. You bow your head in thanks. Experts on maritime trade still discuss whether such transactions were common or rare. Some argue that pirates were too feared to approach in peace, while others believe these small acts of exchange were vital to both sides. Without them, entire crews might have perished, and isolated villages might have starved when their own catches failed. Back at the shore, you push the boat into the surf again. The sky has cleared slightly, and sunlight breaks through the clouds in thin golden streaks. You glance back once. The woman is standing on the hill, arms crossed, watching you go. For a moment, she looks almost like a figure carved from the sea itself, weathered but unbroken. When you return to the ship, the crew gathers to see the bundles. The cook grins like a child. He chops the onions and tosses them into the pot, the smell filling the air. Someone hums an old shanty, slow and wistful. Even the captain looks lighter, his shoulders no longer so tense. That night you eat a stew rich with flavour for the first time in weeks. The taste of onion and cod mixes with smoke and salt. It feels like a miracle disguised as supper. The crew grows quiet after, content and heavy-lidded. The cook wipes his hands and says softly, "Maybe not all land folk hate us." You think of the woman again, her steady eyes, her silent kindness. The sea outside sighs against the hull, gentle now, almost tender. You lie back, full for once, and listen to the murmured voices of your crewmates fading into sleep. As you drift off, you imagine her cottage on the hill, the smell of bread, the faint glow of her fire against the night. Somewhere out there, life still feels warm. The next days blur together in cold mist and grey sky. The food from the village stretches further than anyone expected. The cook rations it with quiet precision, each bowl carefully measured, each portion a lesson in patience. Still, everyone knows it will run out soon. Hunger has a way of counting down the days even when no one else does. On the fifth morning, the lookout spots smoke on the horizon. A merchant ship, small and alone, struggling against the current. The captain studies it through his spyglass, silent for a long time. Finally, he says, "They have food. We do not." The words settle heavily on the deck. It begins without a shout, without a drum. The crew moves like a single creature, practiced and weary. They hoist the sails, adjust the rigging, and steer into the wind. The sea surges beneath the hull, spraying cold foam across your face. Your hands tremble as you grip the rope, though you cannot tell if it's from fear or anticipation. According to surviving maritime logs, winter raids were rare, but not unheard of. Merchant ships slowed by ice made easy targets, though the risks were high. The cold killed almost as efficiently as cannon fire. Yet hunger makes brave men out of fools. As you draw near, you can see the other ship listing slightly to one side. Its sails are frayed, and the crew moves sluggishly. They are exhausted, maybe starving too. For a moment, pity flickers in your chest. Then the captain raises his hand, and pity vanishes. Hooks fly through the air, thudding into the wooden rails. Men swarm across the gap, boots clanging against frozen planks. The clash is brief. The merchants surrender quickly, their faces hollow, eyes dark with resignation. No one has the strength for heroics in winter. Inside the hold, barrels wait like treasure chests. The cook cracks one open, and the scent of wheat floods the air. Flour, clean and dry. Another barrel holds salted beef, pale and solid, perfectly packed. The men cheer softly, too tired to shout. The cook kneels, almost reverent. There is a note in an old naval account describing how pirates often spared ships that surrendered without a fight, taking only food and fuel. It seems strange, but the sea makes men practical. Killing wastes energy. Mercy saves time. You wonder if that's what this is, mercy dressed as hunger. Among the goods, you find something unexpected. A small wooden chest filled with bright red powder. The captain sniffs it and sneezes violently. "Pepper," he laughs. "Real pepper." The men grin at one another, already dreaming of flavor. A curious detail from a Venetian spice ledger mentions how stolen pepper could fetch a higher price than silver in northern ports. It flavored everything from soup to medicine, and for seafarers it masked the taste of age and salt. Tonight, it will do the same for you. The cook works fast, mixing flour with melted snow to make dough, slicing the beef into thin strips. The pepper goes in by handfuls. The smell fills the ship, thick and rich, almost intoxicating after months of bland meals. Someone starts humming again, that same low tune that always surfaces when hope does. Some researchers argue that pirate raids like this blurred the line between theft and trade. Crews often took what they needed and offered gold or labor in exchange, though not always fairly. In the end, survival rarely cared for fairness. You eat that night in silence. The stew is sharp, full of heat. The pepper burns your tongue, but you keep eating until your bowl is clean. For a moment, the taste brings back memories you thought you had forgotten. Warm kitchens, full tables, laughter that didn't sound afraid. After the meal, the captain gathers the crew. "We took enough," he says. "No more." He looks out toward the dark horizon. "Let the sea keep its balance." You do not know if he means it as prayer or warning. Later, you help toss a few small sacks of grain back onto the merchant ship before cutting it loose. The gesture feels strange, almost tender. The men on the other deck wave weakly, their faces lit by lantern light. One of them shouts something you can't make out. You raise a hand anyway. When the sails fill again, and your ship drifts away into the dark, you feel the silence return. The sea hums softly beneath you, as though approving. The cook stows the remaining pepper-like treasure, wrapping it in cloth, promising to make it last. That night, as the wind calms, the ship feels warmer. The air inside the galley carries a trace of spice, faint but real. You breathe it in, eyes half closed, and for the first time in weeks, you almost forget the cold. The sea is restless again, slapping against the hull in uneven rhythm. The grey horizon looks heavy, as if the sky might fall into the water at any moment. You wake to the sound of clanging pots and the faint scent of smoke. Below deck, the cook is already moving, muttering to himself as he tries to coax a fire from damp wood. Cooking on a ship was always an act of defiance. The galley is a small corner wedged near the stern, little more than a box of iron plates and soot-black walls. You crouch beside the cook, watching as he feeds bits of rope fibre into the coals. The flame flutters weakly, then dies. He sighs and rubs his hands together. "She won't catch," he says softly. Records from early naval expeditions describe how cooking at sea was considered both a necessity and a danger. Fire and wood do not mix kindly with salt and tar. Some ships banned open flames altogether, forcing crews to eat cold rations for weeks. Others risked it, knowing that one spark could end everything. You look at the flicker before you and think how thin that line really is. The cook finally coaxes the fire alive, a trembling orange glow that casts his shadow long across the wall. He balances a pot above it and pours in seawater mixed with the last handful of flour. The sound of bubbling fills the air. "Soup," he grins. "Of a kind." You smile back, though your stomach tightens at the thought. One curious discovery from shipwreck excavations shows how sailors sometimes lined their cooking pots with clay to keep salt from corroding the metal. The idea was ingenious but rarely worked. You can imagine the frustration, the smell of burning grease mixed with salt air. Every meal, a compromise. The fire hisses as a drop of seawater splashes into it. Sparks jump, bright against the gloom. The cook curses softly, waving a rag to fan it back. "Always a fight," he mutters. He reaches for a lump of salted beef, scraping off the mold before tossing it into the pot. The meat lands with a dull splash, and the smell that rises is thick and heavy. In the journals of French privateers, there are descriptions of sea stews that mixed anything edible into one pot. Biscuit crumbs, dried peas, bits of fish, even leftover coffee grounds for flavour. It was less a recipe and more a ritual. The goal was warmth, not taste. You sip the broth now, and the warmth slides down your throat like mercy. Some researchers believe the act of cooking itself mattered more than the meal. It gave the men something to gather around, a kind of hearth in a world without land. You see it now, the crew huddled near the galley, hands outstretched toward the small fire, faces soft in the dim glow. The ship rocks gently, and the pot rattles. Someone passes around a crust of bread, softened in the stew. You chew slowly, careful not to waste a crumb. The salt burns your tongue, but you hardly mind. A peculiar anecdote in a sailor's letter describes how, during storms, some cooks tied their pots with rope to keep them from flying across the galley. The letter ends with a quiet joke: "We ate more rope than soup that night." You smile at that, imagining laughter cutting through thunder and fear. Outside, the wind picks up again. You can hear the waves slamming harder against the sides. The cook braces himself, gripping the counter as the ship tilts. The pot nearly slides off its stand before he catches it with a shout. The men laugh nervously. "Ain't losing dinner to the sea," he says, still holding the handle tight. Later, when the storm finally calms, you all eat together in silence. The soup is thin but warm, its steam filling the air like breath. For a moment, you feel almost safe. The crackle of the fire, the rhythm of spoons against tin bowls, it becomes a lullaby of survival. Academic historians still discuss whether pirates had designated cooks or shared the duty among the crew. Some argue that larger ships carried skilled cooks taken from captured vessels, while others claim the title rotated with luck and endurance. Watching your own cook now, hair singed and face soot-streaked, You think it takes a particular kind of soul to feed others in hell. When the last bowl is empty, the fire burns low. The cook wipes his hands on his apron and sits quietly, staring at the embers. The smell of smoke clings to everything: clothes, hair, even dreams. You close your eyes and breathe it in, letting it settle deep inside you. Above deck, the wind shifts. The stars appear one by one, faint and trembling. Somewhere out there, beyond the dark waves, another ship might be cooking its own strange stew. Another crew huddled against the same cold. The thought comforts you, strangely. You are not alone in your hunger. You finish your last sip of broth, feel the warmth spread through your chest, and lean back against the wall. The ship sways gently. The pot cools beside you, and the fire fades to soft red coals. For the first time in days, your belly feels heavy enough to let sleep find you. The next dawn breaks slow and silver. The air feels slightly softer, the wind less cruel than before. You climb to the deck and breathe in the scent of salt and smoke that clings to the morning. The crew moves quietly, half awake, their boots thudding against the damp planks. Somewhere below, the cook is humming again, and a different smell drifts up, this time sweet, sharp, and warm. When you step into the galley, you see him holding a small pouch, its contents glowing faintly orange in the light. "Cinnamon," he says with a grin. "Found it in one of the stolen crates." He opens the pouch, and the scent fills the room instantly. It smells of faraway markets, of places where the air itself feels rich. You breathe deeply, and for a moment, the cold fades. Documents from spice traders of the late medieval period show that pirates often stumbled upon goods they didn't even understand the value of. Cinnamon, nutmeg, pepper, and citrus fruits were among the most prized cargoes. Sometimes the crew kept them for barter. Sometimes they used them in wild experiments with food and drink, just to feel civilized again. The cook sprinkles a pinch into a pot of thin gruel. The smell transforms it, making even hunger seem elegant. You dip your spoon in and taste. The sweetness surprises you, gentle but real. It tastes like something from another life, when meals were more than survival. Curiously, a surviving letter from a Dutch corsair's wife mentions sending him oranges and dried ginger before a winter voyage. She believed the warm flavour would guard him from the cold. Historians now think she meant scurvy, though she could never have known that word. Still, her care carried truth. A little warmth goes a long way at sea. The men gather closer, drawn by the scent. Someone jokes that the cook must have stolen a merchant's wife to make something smell that good. Laughter ripples through the room. Even the captain smiles faintly, standing near the door with his arms crossed. The light catches the gold trim on his coat, dull with salt but still proud. The cook pours cups of steaming liquid for everyone. It is thin, almost like tea, made from dried peel and water. You take a sip. It tastes bitter but alive. "Citrus," the cook explains. "From the wreck. Thought it might help." You nod. Your body feels grateful even if your tongue protests. Some scholars of maritime medicine point out that even before the formal discovery of vitamins, sailors knew instinctively that sour fruits healed them. They didn't need science to see the difference between pale skin and health. You look around and see it in your crewmates' faces, already the faint flush returning, the spark in tired eyes. The cook sets aside a small bowl, saving a few spices for later. "Never use it all at once," he says softly. "A taste of the exotic is like gold. You spend it too fast, and you forget its worth." You nod again, watching how carefully he folds the pouch shut. A curious little note appears in the records of a captured pirate ship called La Fortuna. Among its spoils was a cargo of sugar and cocoa beans from the Iberian coast. The crew reportedly mixed the cocoa with seawater and lard to make a bitter drink. The chronicler who wrote about it called the concoction an abomination, yet the pirates swore it gave them strength. You imagine it now, the taste of chocolate on a frozen deck, strange and sacred. Even the roughest men crave sweetness when the world turns bitter. The captain begins to speak quietly to the crew. He tells them the winds are shifting, that the seas ahead may bring trade routes ripe for interception. His words sound almost gentle. He knows that full bellies make loyal sailors. He knows too that morale can keep men alive when rations cannot. Later, as the sun rises higher, you step back onto the deck. The sky is pale gold now, streaked with thin clouds. The air carries faint traces of cinnamon and smoke. You breathe it in deeply, letting the warmth settle in your chest. There is still debate among historians about how often pirates tasted luxury. Some claim it was rare, fleeting moments of decadence between storms and scarcity. Others suggest that spices and sweets were not only stolen goods but symbols of defiance, a reminder that even outlaws could enjoy the pleasures of kings, if only for a night. You glance toward the horizon. The sea glitters faintly, calm for now. Behind you, laughter drifts from the galley, soft and unguarded. For the first time in weeks, the ship feels less like a prison and more like a home. You sit against the mast, holding your empty cup, the scent of cinnamon still lingering on your fingers. The wind hums low through the ropes, and the sound is almost kind. You close your eyes and let yourself rest, imagining warm markets, orange groves, and sunlit harbours you will never see. The ship creaks gently beneath you, steady and alive. The sea has fed you bitterness for months, but today, just for a moment, it gives back sweetness. By evening, the sweetness of spice has faded, replaced once again by the raw scent of salt and sweat. The warmth of that small miracle is gone, and the ship's hold smells like what it truly is, a tomb for food and patience. You descend the ladder slowly, your boots sinking into damp planks. The deeper you go, the stronger the stench grows. The hold is a world of its own, dim and breathing. Wooden barrels line the walls, some cracked open, others oozing slow trails of grease. You feel the air grow thick as you move between them. The smell of rot, salt, and old meat wraps around you like smoke. Your stomach twists, unsure whether from hunger or disgust. Surviving naval logs describe the lower decks of medieval ships as places where food went to die. The mixture of moisture, heat from the galley, and trapped air turned the storage rooms into slow ovens of decay. Even salted goods suffered. Butter grew green, meat softened into sludge, and bread sprouted things that never should have been alive. You can see it now, glistening faintly in the lantern light. You crouch near a leaking barrel. The brine has turned cloudy, and inside, chunks of something once edible float like ghosts. You reach in with a hook, pulling up a slab of meat slick with slime. The smell makes you recoil. You drop it quickly and wipe your hands on your coat, though the grease never really leaves. One traveller's diary from the early 15th century describes sailors coating spoiled food with vinegar and spice to hide the taste. It worked just enough to swallow without gagging. You wonder if they knew they were eating sickness, or if denial tasted better than hunger. The cook joins you, lantern in hand. His eyes squint through the smoke. "It's turning faster than I thought," he mutters. The cold above keeps the air damp. Salt can't fight it forever. He taps one of the barrels with his knife, listening to the hollow sound. 2 more days, maybe 3, before it's all gone bad. You nod, your throat tight. The idea of losing what little you have left feels unbearable. He sighs, lifting the lantern higher. The flame throws shapes against the walls, dark stains, crawling shadows, movement that might be rats or worse. Oddly enough, there are old accounts of pirates keeping cats aboard for this very reason. The animals were not pets, but soldiers in an endless war against vermin. Some ships even listed them among the crew. You glance around and almost wish for a cat's quick eyes in this reeking dark. The cook finds a smaller barrel tucked behind the others and cracks it open. Inside are onions, shriveled but still holding their form. He grins faintly. "Small miracles," he says. You help him lift it, carrying it toward the stairs. Each step creaks like a warning. When you reach the deck, fresh air floods your lungs, sharp and clean. The cook wipes sweat from his brow, muttering, "At least the stink doesn't climb all the way up here." You glance at the sea and realize how deceptive the open air can be. Above, the world is endless and clear. Below, it festers quietly, waiting to poison whoever forgets to fear it. One strange artifact found in the wreck of an English brigantine was a small clay pot filled with dried mint leaves. Archaeologists suspect it was used to cover the stench of the hold. Imagine that a handful of herbs standing between sanity and madness. You almost smile, thinking of how fragile comfort becomes when survival is the only measure of wealth. The captain comes down from the helm, glancing at the cook. "How bad?" he asks simply. The cook hesitates, then tells the truth. The captain nods once. "We ration again. Half portions." A low murmur ripples through the deck, but no one argues. Hunger has already taught them that silence saves strength. Some maritime historians still argue about how captains managed rations during long winters. A few claim it was done democratically. Others insist it was tyranny disguised as order. In truth, it was likely both. The man who controls food controls every life on board. You watch the crew line up for their small bowls of stew that night. The smell of rot clings to it, faint but undeniable. Some men hold their noses, others eat without blinking. You do the same, forcing each swallow. The body learns to obey hunger before taste. The wind outside grows stronger, rattling the ropes like bones. The ship groans with the motion, but the rhythm is almost soothing. You close your eyes for a moment, breathing through your mouth, trying to forget the smell that lives below your feet. After dinner, the cook tosses a handful of mint and onion peel into the fire. The scent sharpens, cutting briefly through the damp air. He leans against the wall, eyes tired but steady. "It's not the hunger that kills," he says quietly. "It's the smell." You stop believing in food after a while. You nod, not sure what to say. The truth sits heavy between you. The sea does not starve you quickly, it starves you slowly, by turning food into fear. When you finally crawl into your hammock, the air feels almost thick enough to chew. You breathe shallowly, the taste of smoke and decay still lingering on your tongue. Above, the wood creaks, the waves whisper, and the ship drifts through the night like a ghost searching for a place to forget its hunger. When morning comes, the air feels brittle, as if the world might crack if touched too suddenly. The frost has returned, glittering faintly on the ropes and the rails. You wake to the captain's voice calling for a shore party again. The stores below deck have reached their limit. If you are to eat at all this week, you must find what the land will give. The island ahead looks bleak, a stretch of snow and pine framed by jagged cliffs. The sea sighs against it, a slow, steady rhythm. You row toward the beach with 6 others, your hands aching from the oars. The cold bites through your gloves, and your breath fogs in front of you. Every sound feels sharp enough to break. When the boat grinds onto the shore, the silence is so complete that even the crunch of your boots seems too loud. The air smells of pine sap and ice. Somewhere inland, a raven calls once and then goes quiet. Old coastal records from Norway and Scotland describe how stranded crews survived winters by